Okay, in today's video I wanted to talk about identity in motherhood because it's something that really transforms once you become a mom. Everything changes. So obviously not everyone is going to have the same experience. I don't really like making those sorts of politically correct disclaimers in order to appease everybody because I think it distracts from the focus of the message that we're trying to talk about. So in this instance, if you have felt very affected by the transformational power of, becoming a mom, then this video will be for you. If, on the other hand, you haven't felt transformed at all in your motherhood journey, then this video won't be for you. You probably won't find it relatable or applicable or interesting. So I say that because I know that in so many videos things start and people are going to talk about something, they have something they want to talk about, and then they always have to kind of disclaim themselves and say, sorry if blah blah blah, sorry if that. I find like we apologize a lot lately as a culture. But yeah, I just want to stay focused on the message. So if you have felt very transformed by motherhood, this video is for you. So let's start with the science of it. Undeniably, scientifically, you can look it up. All the studies demonstrate the transformation that happens within a woman once they give birth and once they become a mom. The actual brain of a woman, of a mom, completely transforms and changes. They say so there's even a word, it's called matrescence, and it's all about how women, just basically completely transform once they become a mom. Not one of the biggest transformations, but a huge part of that is your identity. And as a mom, I think you are kind of constantly readjusting to your identity. You feel one way for a certain time, and then the more you grow, the more you change, the more everything starts changing. So I've got some studies up on here. So in terms of the kind of changes that you see in a woman's brain, there are neuroanatomical changes which are observed over the course of, it's preconception. So let's just say conception through to 2 years postpartum. And a lot of studies actually show a great reduction in the brain's gray matter as well, which apparently correlates to movement, memory, and emotions. So that's a real thing. There's many studies showing the loss of gray matter in a woman's brain, and obviously, like it says on the studies there, it affects social cognition. So there is a genuine scientific transformational change going on in a mother's brain. So that's a real thing. It's not just like, you think you feel different, or you're making it up or whatever. So long story short, and you can go and read more studies for yourself if you find that kind of thing interesting to do and to get involved with, but it's just to lay the foundation to show how there's very legitimate, very substantial amounts of scientific evidence, research, review about how women's brains change postpartum, and how that completely affects you, obviously, in your day-to-day life. So obviously one of the biggest changes, one of the most talked about changes, is that identity change that you go through as a mother. So I won't speak in general terms now, I'll just speak about myself, and you'll hopefully find that relatable. So for me, I feel like everything changed about myself. My core beliefs, my core values, and who I am as a person didn't change. But sometimes it's a little bit gradual. Like, it wasn't like I gave birth and I was a different person. But I would say a year in now, I'm a completely different person to who I was even in that last month of pregnancy. whilst I was pregnant, I was still very much myself. I was still completely myself. But once kind of all the transformation continued happening, I can definitely say with certainty that I'm a completely different person to who I was at the beginning, or like before. The change happens, I think, like behaviorally, like, so behavioral things change, your kind of maybe your perceptions change. I don't think like your values change, like your core values, but I think you do kind of start developing maybe like new values as well. Like there's a lot of different little things that change, and basically it just kind of recomposes you into a new person. And some of the kind of more basic ways that that transformation is visible or starts feeling visible is through things like what you wear, for example. So a lot of moms find it a huge struggle when they give birth and then they don't know like kind of who they are in terms of expressing themselves with what they wear. So for example, I had a lot of different type of clothes. I had clothes that were related to my job, so like suit style clothes and things like that. And I did not give it a second thought when I was pregnant. I just thought, yeah, sure. When my body shrinks back down in size, I'll go back to wearing all the stuff that I've always worn for like years. And I basically did not want to wear any of those things. I didn't feel like any of them represented me. I didn't feel comfortable in them. I felt like I was wearing someone else's clothes. How strange is that? And this kind of thing, which, it can seem like you're talking about something really trivial, like, oh, it's just clothing, but it goes deeper than that. So it goes to like your personality, and, like I'm explaining, you've obviously gone through a huge transformation. Your brain has actually changed. There are transformations happening, and like I explained earlier, if we think about that word matrescence, like I'm explaining, one of the ways that those changes started being manifested was, through clothing. And you start feeling like nothing of what you have represents you anymore. So for me personally, I actually got rid of, I think, all of my clothes, like all of them. The only thing I kept were like some leggings and some athletic clothing and some basic t-shirts, I think. But I think even I've gotten all new t-shirts and everything as well. Now there's two things, like it's a twofold thing. In one way, your clothes are probably no longer apt for your lifestyle. So my lifestyle now consists of running around after my kid, sitting down on the floor and playing with him no matter where we are. So if we go out somewhere or I'm like book browsing, he's crawling or he's walking, but he's still tiny. So I'm still like, I go down to his ground floor level and I have to have things that are comfortable for me to move around in. So obviously, there's a practicality element of having a wardrobe change or refresh once you become a new mom. But like I'm trying to explain, far beyond that, it's actually something that is representative of the transformational change that you're going through hormonally and in your brain internally, like realistically, physically. Why do I say all of that? I say all of that because I think it's important for women to know that this is a normal thing and to feel like it's a normal thing, and also kind of to also be a little bit prepared for it. I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't know I was going to completely change. I didn't know that I was going to find a whole bunch of stuff that I used to do and like before not interesting. Like I didn't know that those changes would take place. And I think having that little bit of preparation helps a lot. So like, if you're expecting and you're watching this video, then hopefully what I've explained so far is giving you a little bit of an insight. Like I haven't gone too in depth into anything because I've just kind of tried to lay a little bit of a foundation and information for you to kind of start becoming acquainted with the fact that like very real, very big changes are so common once you become a mom. And to just kind of have a little bit of preparation for that, because it's important. Like I said, I didn't know that I would be going through so many changes. And it's fine, I've navigated them fine, but I think it would have helped to have been a little bit more prepared and know that, because anywhere from like silly things to like more important things, I kind of tried to pre-plan a few things, because that's kind of how I like to live my life. I try and be organized and plan things. And just like, let's take a silly example. I bought a few different postpartum clothing items, thinking, oh great, this will be just what I need, you know, postpartum, I can wear that, and you know, I'll be really comfortable, it'll be easy to breastfeed. And again, that's a whole separate subject, making assumptions about breastfeeding, which thankfully, yeah, I was able to do just fine. But you know, I'm gonna have a separate video about that. I ended up actually not using any of those clothes, because I genuinely felt like it was someone else's clothing. So hopefully that paints like a really good picture of just how much you can change. And gradually that change and those feelings have become more and more and more pronounced, to the point where, like I'm saying now, I feel like a completely different person to who I was before. I feel like before I was maybe more like like a little girl kind of thing, but now I feel a lot more you know, just different. So yeah, so that's a little bit of like the foundation of the kind of real physical and hormonal changes that you are definitely going to go through as a mom. And now I want to talk about, so like that hopefully helps you if you're, like I said, if you're expecting, or if you're just interested in this subject. I've laid the kind of groundwork so that we can now talk about how to deal with it. So now that we know that we're definitely going through a lot of changes, and again, knowing that gives us kind of like that security and peace of mind, I guess, because you know that your body's going through changes. And again, it's not just your physical body, so like your size will be different. For me, for example, I was always like a size 6, size 8, so 32, 34 in Europe, in Spain anyway. I don't know what that is in the US, a size 2, I think, in the US. Anyway, it's just to say. And then now I'm like, still a year postpartum, anywhere between 2 to 4 sizes bigger than that. When people look at me, they don't see that as much. They think like, oh my gosh, you look great, like you look just like your old self. But I don't, because I don't fit into any of my old clothes, not by a long shot. I mean, there was one jean, that the V-neck that you see on my shirt, was that far apart from like buttoning. It's the kind of thing where like I doubt that I'll ever, you know, shrink down that much. Again, it's a question of your hips changing and stuff. So, you know, we're talking about physical changes as well, which are gonna completely affect the way you see your body and yourself, and even the way you want to express yourself. But like I said, beyond that, we're also dealing with actual brain changes, like changes in gray matter of our brain, and of course tons of hormonal changes. So, you know, a great indicator of that is how your period is behaving. Going through so many, your body and your brain and everything about you is going through a lot of changes. So let's talk a little bit about how my suggestions, my help for dealing with that. So another huge part of a woman's identity usually is her work. Not just women, but everyone, men and women, they usually identify themselves a lot through their work. So one of the biggest things that I heard coming up to the end of my maternity leave was, you know, the dreaded question, are you going to go back to work or not? And everyone is in their own situation. This video is not to talk about that. The number one statement that pretty much I've heard everyone make, mothers, health visitors, that's what they're called here, the nurses who come to your house to check on you and the baby, they're called health visitors. So, you know, the number one thing that everyone says is, well, you know, it's scary at first, but when you go back to work, you really get your identity back and you get back that sense of self. And So this is something that I really want to talk about in this video. There's two things I want to say. The first thing is, I don't think we should attach our identity to our job. I don't think that's a positive thing. You know, I've spoken about kind of Buddhism in other videos before, and this isn't a video about Buddhism or to kind of try and get you to convert or think about it. It's just, I just want to take one of the values from there and use that to explain something. In Buddhism, they teach non-attachment. Obviously, don't want to be attached to something like your job. You don't want your identity to be defined by your job or where you work. So, I'll speak again on a personal level. I actually loved my job that I had right up until maternity leave. It was a super job, so totally loved it, and that was a really hard thing for me, but I found an area of law that I've always wanted to work in. I actually had a really great team, and I was enjoying all of the experiences. I was able to do a lot of great work, and I was just loving it. So even though I actually personally really enjoyed my job, I didn't let it define me. So again, if we just go back to those kind of those values that Buddhism tries to teach us about non-attachment, you know, I think if you practice that, it's a really healthy way to not let yourself get caught up in, I'm defined by what I do. You know, you're defined by way more than your job. Again, I don't want to linger like too much on trying to talk about Buddhist values, but I just really want to give the message of non-attachment, because it's very positive in your general life, but especially in situations like this. You don't want to make the mistake of like feeling like you have to have a job, or you have to go back to work, or you have to do the things that you were doing before in order to still feel like yourself. Like I explained, you know, the scientific evidence shows that you will have changed, and that and I think that's where that phrase that everyone's saying, oh, you get your identity back, you get a little bit of your sense of self back, I think that's where that can become a little bit harmful, because it almost kind of undermines and ignores the fact that you have changed and that that's okay. It's almost like, yeah, we all feel like we've changed, we feel a bit lost, we feel confused, but if you get back to your job, you'll get that sense of identity back. And yeah, I think that's great if it works for you and you do get that back, but I'm trying to talk about something a little bit kind of deeper. So I think you shouldn't let what you do define your identity, because it's a little bit, well, it's reductionist. I think, you know, you're much more than that. You're not just your job. And I can understand why doing that, getting back to work, makes you feel like yourself again, because it's like what's happening is you're just going back to familiarity. So obviously that's going to make you feel like yourself again, because you're like, oh, I know this. I'm comfortable with this. I know what I'm doing. But what we can't forget is, even if you know, we do feel like we've got that little bit of identity back by going back to work, you don't want that to negate the fact that it's okay to have changed, because you have changed and that's okay. So I think one of the best ways to deal with this change in identity that we're going to go through is to, and that's my point, is to really allow yourself that process. And that's my point again. So if you try and force that identity to come back, or you're trying to find it in your job, so like say you go back to work and everyone, that's all you hear. It'll be great when you go back, you'll get that sense of self back, you'll get your identity back. Now say you go back to work and you don't really quite feel like that, and there's a lot of moms that feel that way. Then you're gonna be really questioning yourself and feeling like, oh, have I done something wrong, or something wrong with me, or how come I don't like this anymore, or how come I don't fit in, or how come, you know, I don't find these people relatable anymore, even though I used to before. That's okay. That's what I'm trying to say, is those are all very normal, completely functional changes that you're going through. And I am obviously by no means a mom expert or anything like that. I'm just trying to talk from experience, and I'm trying to share a little bit of that research and that science, just to make it clear that it's not just me making things up, and then I'm just kind of trying to share the little bit of different knowledge I have from reading different texts like Buddhism and stuff, and how that can really help you to not feel that burden of identity, because I think it can be a bit of a burden for people. Like, there's so many people who are always trying to figure out who they are and what they should be doing, and again, I did want to make a separate video about that, because I saw a great interview with several Japanese people who were speaking about finding their Ikigai. But in the interview, I was actually really pleasantly surprised to hear what they thought their Ikigai to be, which isn't at all what marries with the Western interpretation of it. And the reason I say that is because, again, I think we're very focused, and it's not a bad thing, but we are very focused on those definitions and the identities and things like that. And I think sometimes it is to our hindrance. So, and I think motherhood is a fantastic, or probably the biggest example of why it's so important to be okay with letting go and readjusting and reshaping yourself. And it's a rebirth. They call it that for a reason. It is a rebirth. It's not just, and they say this, this is said a lot in so many different quotes, but it's not just the birth of the child, but it's the birth of the mother. And that is so true, because you're completely being born as a new person. I mean, again, not to say the same thing again, but if your brain is actually going through physical changes in your brain, then just imagine, what's really just completely going on inside of you, and this new transformation that you're taking. So I think by trying to embrace that change in identity, we're going to do ourselves a big service, rather than rushing to try and cling on to the past and whatever our version of our identity was before. I think we'll hurt ourselves if we do that, because we have, inescapably, you have grown and changed, and I think it's okay to accept that. Doesn't mean that it's easy. For example, if you have to take the decision to be a stay-at-home mom, if you are very defined by your career or your job, it's, there's many women who simply won't choose it because they're that defined by their career and their job, and they don't want to leave that. And I understand that, because it's really hard to give up, especially if it's something that you enjoy. It's really hard to give it up when you enjoy it, because sometimes those things can be hard to find too. So you're talking about letting go of something that you enjoy, that it brings you benefit, that was hard for you to get. Maybe you've worked a long time to achieve it. So there's there's a lot going on that affects the identity of a woman, as she's becoming a mom. And just back again to the hormonal changes, your hormones apparently don't settle till about 2 years postpartum, and even then I think you're still going through shifts, but it's almost like the first 2 whole years are a write-off, because of that's how many changes your hormones are going through at the time. So my tips to try and kind of deal with this identity shift as best as we can. Allow yourself to go through the process, and don't be in a rush to attach yourself back to the identity that you think you should have or that you had before. So I'll share my examples in the hope that they hopefully help you. With my sense of identity in myself, in my dressing, I let go of all of my clothes, rather than forcing myself to try and fit back into something, or exercise really hard to get my body back to what it was before, rather than force myself to wear something that I didn't feel comfortable in. And I don't mean comfortable as in like I'm comfortable in a t-shirt. I mean like I didn't feel myself. So So yeah, rather than forcing myself into clothing, into this, into that, I just let it all go. If I went to put it on and I wasn't comfortable, then I would just get rid of it. I didn't think twice about it. And I bought very sparingly as I went. So I kind of bought necessity type stuff first. I was like, okay, it's cold, leggings are comfortable, I'll wear leggings. That's kind of my suggestion for as far as your sense of self goes with clothing and dressing. Don't try and hold too hard and fast to anything, and just allow yourself that patience to let go of it. And definitely don't force yourself to try and fit back into any clothes. I don't think that's positive. I think, you know, it's okay. Next, our identity in terms of our job. Again, like I explained, I think we should work not to feel so attached to our job wherein we define ourselves by it. I know it can be easier said than done, but some of the things that you can do, focus on some truths, like, you know, you don't have any less value because you're no longer at work. It's very easy to feel like you don't have any value, you don't, you know, you're not doing anything because you're just at home. But, you know, this is very hard work. This is actually more hard work than, you know, the kind of job I was doing before, where, you know, and again, I was working in law, so you can quite imagine how difficult and time consuming and meticulous you had to be to work in that field. But what I do now is 50,000 times harder. And not to mention that as a mom, especially if you're a stay-at-home mom, you don't have an off button. You don't get any seconds off. You know, at work you get a break, you get a lunch break, you get vacations. You don't get that as a mom. There's no break, there's no vacations, you don't have an hour's lunch to yourself. So, you know, it's really easy to feel devalued. I think in general, you know, not everyone might agree with this, but I do think in general there's a little bit of that kind of stigma in society where, like, you're just a stay-at-home mom, or you're just a mom. It's almost kind of like you haven't really amounted to anything, you haven't achieved anything. And, you know, so just try and remind yourself of the opposite of that. You know, when we feel like our identity has changed for the worse because we feel like, well, before we were, you know, successful, we had a career, we were contributing members of the household, we had our own money, we, you know, we were independent, whatever, all of these kind of things. And all of those kind of different ideas definitely shape your identity and definitely form your opinion of yourself and your identity. So, you know, yeah, I think this is a really hard one, but I think definitely just try and keep reminding the value of what you're doing and the worth of what you're doing, and remember that, you know, you are not defined by a job. And even if you had a really great, successful, amazing career, just because you stopped, it doesn't mean you're not that person anymore. It doesn't mean you're not that great, successful person. It just means you're doing something different for right now. So it doesn't make you any less worthy or special, or anything like that. And it's very easy to feel like that. So yeah, so we've discussed a little bit about sense of self in terms of our identity and how we express that through clothing, because clothing is a really big one. Moms always feel like they don't know, you know, what to wear, or, you know, kind of who they are anymore, you know, and so yeah, clothing is a big one. But again, it's because that is how people usually express themselves and define themselves, you know. Just to be really stereotypical, if you're like a girly girl, you'll wear pink and you'll like that kind of thing. But you know, even that kind of stuff will change. Your preferences for colors, like, so you're going through such a huge transformation. If you're expecting, be ready to go through changes and accept them. And it does very much indeed feel like you're going backwards when you're trying to cling on to who you were pre-birth. If you feel like that, especially, that's another great clue. So if you feel like you're forcing yourself to go backwards or to go back to who you were pre-birth, then again, just embrace the fact that you're going to have a new identity, and it's going to transform and develop slowly over time. And it's okay for it to change. And yeah, just kind of try and keep reminding yourself of all of those little things, and hopefully it helps you. I'll probably make a few more videos about the identity changes that you go through as a mom. Now for this one, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about it, and yeah, hopefully it was useful and helpful to you, and informational. And like I said, so yeah, if you're expecting, be prepared for that change, and just be calm about it. And if you're already in the middle of it or going through it like I am, then those are some of my tips to hopefully help you. Try not to get too attached to the identity of who you were before you gave birth. It's okay to let that go. And in fact, like I'm saying, I suggest that you should practice letting that go so that you can grow into this new person. And I know that it's hard, but I think you do transform for the better. And allow yourself to go through the transformation. Don't hold on to who you were before, even if it's hard. And that's why a lot of mothers actually go into different job roles. They go into new employment. That's a very common thing too. Again, because their identity has changed. Their perceptions have changed. Their feelings of who they are have changed, so they can't go back to the job they had before, because they no longer feel like it represents them, or they no longer feel like they fit in, or, a whole bunch of reasons. So yeah, don't hold on too tightly to who you were. Don't worry if you've had to make different choices around your career. All of it is going to be part of your transformation and your change in identity. It's a real thing. It's normal to feel completely different to who you were before. And like I'm saying, my suggestion, I've given a few different tips, but my biggest tip is really to just go for it and embrace it. Try and embrace it as much as you can. It's a positive thing. I want to come out the other side transformed, because I think you're going to be a better mom and a better person for it. I think in my channel I always talk about kind of growth and non-attachment and these kind of things, and minimalist, letting go is a huge part of that. We spend all of our time just clinging on to the past. We don't leave any room for growth. So remember to leave room for growth and transformation. And all of your changes in identity are very normal, and there's scientific research to show just how much you change. So just try and take it one day at a time, and accept the changes when you see them, and don't be scared to do things differently. And I've actually found that really helpful. I've started doing a lot of stuff differently, and it's been positive. It's all been positive. It's all been beneficial. So where you feel scared to try new things or scared to do things differently, again, my another tip is to try it and go for it, because you actually do come out better the other side of it. And you'll soon find that it forms part of the new person that you are becoming and your new identity. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching that. I'm sorry if it's at all boring with just me talking here, but yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.